Hi everyone, we're back here at Beyond Labels, a new episode. I've got two guests today. Val, who works for us at Blooming Supports, and we also got the CEO of Enriched by Experience, Emma Ketley.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
You did. Emma Ketley. Yep.
Welcome, Emma. Emma is a mental health occupational therapist and also an ADHD coach.
That's
for
correct.
Adults?
Yeah, just for adults. So
All right.
16 years and up. Yeah.
All right. So we want to know about ADHD coaching. What is it? How did you get there? And why did you do it? Because that's very interesting.
Okay. So, hello Val, hello Sandra, hello everyone. First of all, Sandra, thank you so much for calling me the CEO of Enriched by Experience. It makes it sound very grand.
It does.
It's actually just a one-person business, so it's me, and I'm my own CEO. And you've asked me about ADHD coaching. So I got into ADHD coaching in 2021 through an academy called ADCA, which is the Attention Deficit Disorder, it's an old name, coaching academy. And they're the flagship coaching academy for ADHD. So they're endorsed by the International Coaching Federation and for the Professional Coaching Association for ADHD coaches as well. So they're a specialist academy. And I had to go through 3 courses to get to the stage that I am now. I had to pay in American dollars, but it was a very comprehensive, very good course, culminating in the beginning of this year in a 3-hour exam to become an accredited ADHD coach recognised by ICF.
Wow.
Yeah. The reason I got into it was that I trained as a mental health occupational therapist back in 2002, which is a very long time, and I've specialised in adult mental health, but recognising as far back in 2020 that I was getting people with a co-occurrence of ADHD, which in mental health services neurodivergency in adults was being overlooked. And I realised that I wanted to do much more training in it. And I was looking around, and at that point, back 4 years ago, I couldn't find any specialist training for adults with ADHD. So that's why I went down the ADHD coaching route initially. But it's a completely different way of working from therapy, and I really love it. So I currently offer ADHD coaching and mental health therapy as 2 separate streams.
Mm-hmm. And as an ADHD coach, when you work with someone, what's the main scope of work or focus, let's say?
Yeah, so the main scope of focus for an ADHD coach is that we don't manage the clinical risk as I would in therapy. So if there's any mental health distress, then that's very much a therapeutic issue and a clinical issue. And ICF have got very clear rules and guidance on that. But what I like around ADHD coaching is that there is no referral apart from that person's own referral to see you. It's 100% client-led. There is no framing as such of a problem or an issue from anyone outside of the client, and it's 100% self-directed by the client. And I find that it's much more around those aspirational life goals and mindset than therapy is. We're not looking through a medical model lens to reduce symptoms. We're actually looking at how best to work with your neurosparkly, as I like to call it, neurosparkly brain, and actually work out how best to optimize those abilities.
All right. So, and it's in simple words, is someone that is diagnosed with ADHD to learn how to work with yourself, or
Yeah, I think it's a kind of where to from here. I mean, if anyone's had a physical injury, you see like a surgeon, you see a physio, and then you get to a point where, everything's stable, but you kind of ask yourself where to from here, and you want to imagine what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine being diagnosed with ADHD, and there's a lot of late diagnosed adults. It's like, well, what now? How do I work best with this? Because I've been, in my case, I recognised I'd been struggling for a while, and coaching just, first of all, makes you very much more comfortable with that. It's around the acceptance, but it's also about recognising those strengths and working out, okay, well, my brain works best when.
Yeah.
So we have executive functioning strategies. I work in partnership for people to realise what goals are possible, reasonable and realistic, but they're not the ones that the doctors would be interested in. It's more around, I've got people that I don't provide business advice, but for example, they might have doubted for years that they're able to be business owners. And then we just look at, okay, well, how can we manage some of these, unique traits of ADHD? What are your skill strengths, and how can we best put those to use? So it's absolutely outside of the medical model, and it's much more strengths focused and future focused.
And in relation to someone who's got ADHD, or the other way around, autism,
Yes.
and then diagnosed in the adult life as with ADHD, how does it work? Do they go together? It's easier to see when someone got autism. It's very, look, it's a very big world.
Yes, it is.
And it's got so many, so many points where it leads you. So it's interesting.
It is hugely interesting, and I think the NDIS landscape has really put this issue on the table around the co-occurrence of autism and ADHD. I think we've got much more prevalence around recognising that there's ADHDers that may also have autism and vice versa. And also diagnostically in the DSM, which is what our doctors use to diagnose the criteria of autism or ADHD, you couldn't have co-occurrence of ADHD and autism until after the last DSM-5. So it's only after 2013 and the release of that, around early 2000 to 2020, that we could recognise that people could be autistic and ADHD. So in a very summarised point, I guess we're still really learning about that combined presentation.
Yeah.
It's something that we didn't diagnose previous to DSM-5, and now we're all of a sudden really adapting to that co-occurrance. And they mask each other, they balance each other out. I don't know if you know any.
I do.
Yes.
I do. A couple.
Yeah. So beautiful, amazing, driven, passionate people, and they will just talk about how one almost cancels the other one out and causes conflict at the same time. There's this strive for wanting routine, for example, which is more of an autistic trait, whereas the ADHD brain is novelty and interest seeking. So they want the routines, and at the same time, part of their brain rebels against that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did COVID change any of that, or as in for diagnosing? Because I've seen quite a few things about how many people got diagnosed with both autism and ADHD after COVID and being alone for so long. They were like, oh, okay, these traits are not everyday, not normal people traits, not neurotypical traits.
Yeah, that is a great question. That is a fantastic question. I think we had that perfect mix of COVID, changes to funding, like I said, NDIS, changes to the DSM. And we had all of that at a time when we had that enforced reflection because of lockdown, right?
Yeah.
And because ADHD brains are rarely still, and we're naturally the universe's seekers, right? You know, what are we gonna? We're going to want to seek out information. We're going to want to put information out there, and so we did have a huge influx of a lot of information about neurodivergency come out during COVID, which raised awareness. Yeah. And it's obviously, once it became an adult diagnosis, we were able to put a name to it. Yeah. So I think it's a great question, because I think definitely without that pause that COVID put the whole world in, most of us wouldn't have had that time to reflect. I, for myself, that's when I did my ADHD coaching training. So I was already beginning to seek, you know, what is this? Why is it that I can, with some clients, almost finish off what they're going to say and they'll look really surprised because they're describing neurodivergency, and hey, I'm supposed to be the clinician in the room. I'm not supposed to, my position is not supposed to be that, but I'm actually human. And I think it was COVID, and I know that my own diagnosis has been like a 4-year round journey, partly because of COVID gave me that time to think. I think it was a good question.
And your lived experience, you know, Lumina started because of lived experience, and makes us very passionate about what we do because of it, because you can understand from a different perspective. So tell us about your journey.
So my journey, like I said, so it would have been about 2020 that I had actually been working for a fantastic little sort of business and OT agency that worked with a psychiatrist that was neurodivergently informed and would give the diagnoses of ADHD. But I was actually at that point working as a dialectical behavioural therapist for the team. And what we had found was that people would be considered to be disengaging with services with DBT therapists. But I started to realise that there was somewhere hidden in that referral was also these 4 letters, ADHD. And so it wasn't so much someone who was, I don't know, feeling emotionally challenged by therapy. It was also someone that perhaps from an executive functioning point of view was having difficulty maintaining the commitment of therapy. So I started to shape my sessions a little bit more. I started to schedule in the homework practice for them. I started to send messages of like, just a reminder, have you done this yet, you know, for the self-directed therapy that I would do outside of sessions. And I suppose from that, people were like, oh, you know, this is one for Emma. And in talking to my clients, it's very common for a woman of my age to realise that they're neurodivergent when their children get diagnosed. But that's not my world. It's almost like my clients taught me that I was neurodivergent and made me aware that I was neurodivergent, because I would be able to sit and have these conversations and completely understand, to the point where in one session, one of my clients just looked me dead in the eye and went, how long have you had ADHD for? And I had to go, oh no, I haven't. Whilst also sitting with, I think I might have it. But it took me 2 more years to get my diagnosis, and then it's been 2 years this year that I'll be have my diagnosis.
Why did it take you 2 years? Because there wasn't enough specialists out there? All right.
It was partly because, you know, to be diagnosed is a privilege. It's a privilege of access to services, to being able to support that cost. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was also, I think, for my own part, thinking, well, I have coped quite a few years now, so maybe it's okay. And I've actually designed a app. Last year I wrote content for a ADHD app, and I insisted that they had a module on imposter syndrome, because part of it for 2 years was me going, no I don't, oh yes I do, no I don't. No. Yeah. And it wasn't because I was stigmatizing ADHD, it was more like I just hadn't thought of it applying to me Not because I'm, in an ivory tower anywhere, but just because I hadn't thought of that. I'd gone through university, I'd been moderately functioning, moderately to high functioning, and no one had ever picked it up. But my clients did.
Yeah. But for a reason.
Yes, because they felt very safe, they felt very comfortable, and we would have naturally flowing conversations, and they would often just say, you know what, you get it. I need you to talk to my doctor because you get it. And I'm not talking about that doctor, that psychiatrist, but they would just say, you need to talk to my GP. Can I get you to talk to my family members because you just get this? But, yeah.
Is the presentation of ADHD hugely different between women and men?
Yeah, the general accepted theory is that yes. And the thinking behind that is that women have learned to internalize their symptoms so much more, part because of social norms. We're supposed to be the nesters, we're supposed to be the calm people in families, we're supposed to be the people that people go to for answers. We are not supposed to be the hunter-gatherers or the ones that when we're kids play with guns or make noisy, battles or anything like that. So we have somewhat learnt to internalise that. So I'm seeing a lot more psychiatrists becoming more informed that they need to look for the soft signs or the hidden signs of ADHD. That super helpful girl in the classroom that would always help the teacher out because it's a way of getting out of your chair rather than wandering around.
Yeah.
Sorry, Val.
Thank you. You spotted from a mile away.
Yeah. And there's been times when people are like, oh, are you daydreaming, or you look calm, but I'm running lists through my head. It's internalized hyperactivity, and it's thought that women and girls do that much more than the externalizing symptoms of hyperactivity.
Yeah, that's why it's so hard.
Yes.
Or we get more males with ASD diagnoses than females.
Absolutely.
You mentioned DBT.
Yes.
What is that? for people that don't speak ADHD.
Dialectical behavioural therapy, and that's a mental health therapy. So again, that's pulling on me being a mental health therapist as well as an ADHD coach. So ADHD coaches don't provide DBT, but it's such a great modality that I know that people instinctively want to borrow things. So you might see it popping up with an ADHD coach, but it's much more in the therapy framework. DBT is the idea that we can have two seemingly opposite principles together. So currently I can be anxious in this interview and still appear quite confident or relaxed.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be black or white. It's that walking that middle path. So what we have in DBT is the biggest principle is that as a modality we recognise that it's only when you accept as things as they are that you can change them. So DBT holds those two paradoxical principles of acceptance of now with change. And it's been used with borderline personality disorders, it's been used transdiagnostically with eating disorders, with substance abuse, for everything really. And it all starts with recognising where are you now. So it uses a lot of mindfulness
That's
and
good.
stress tolerance skills.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you were studying at uni, you didn't know you had ADHD.
No.
So how was it?
So I've actually done 2 degrees. I've got an art history degree, which I described recently as I did that by accident. I actually intended to do art history, English literature as well. It was art history, English literature and culture, but it had a drama component. But I didn't read the course brochure very well, and so I ended up doing a course that had drama in it, and I'm naturally an introvert. So it's very easy to overlook things. So that's a classic ADHD trait. I can overlook small details. the other degree that I did was OT. So both of them, I labelled myself pretty self-critically. I was forever telling myself I need to be more organised than this, or why have I missed what the lecturer has just said? Why can't I listen? So I've got actually mixed type ADHD, so I'm inattentive and hyperactive, but classically that hyperactivity is much more internalised, but can be mistaken when I'm very passionate about something as being me being an extrovert, because I can't shut up when I'm passionate about something. But yeah, if I look back, it was much more of a struggle. And so what I love to do now is when people have an early diagnosis, it is to point them towards student services. It is about having those brave conversations with people that can support, because if you know, then you can get those supports and you don't have to have that isolation of struggle. Because I had a lot of isolation and struggle, so I had a lot of 11th hour deadlines that I was always doing. I over-challenged myself. At one point for my English degree, I was making a costume for a Shakespearean play. I was writing my dissertation and I was working. All because I had this concept in my head that I must be lazy, I'm not doing enough. And if only I can get myself more organised, then I can do more.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, you're busier, so then you must be organized to get everything that you have put or sets like you're gonna do. Then it does make sense.
Yeah, and I'm not a perfectionist anymore. People might recognise that in some of my social media posts, and heck, I'm enjoying that because for years I was a real perfectionist as well, and I see that as a very strong ADHD trait, in that it's got to be perfect for me to recognise that I'm doing just okay. It's constantly like overcompensating through doing more or doing better, because it's never good enough if you haven't got this self-acceptance of your sparkly brain. Yeah.
How did you see it now at uni?
There's a lot of, they have like the help and things like that where you can take your diagnosis and submit it, and they give you extra time.
Yes.
Or they give you difference in deadlines and things like that.
Yeah.
What I haven't seen is if you haven't been able to be diagnosed yet. And that's the sort of difference, because for myself, now that you're speaking a lot about it, I'm like, maybe there is something there extra.
Yeah.
But I've talked to other people around, and they're like trying to get diagnosed a year and a half still, and they can't. They go to teachers and they say, I'm in the process of getting diagnosis, and they tell you there's nothing we can do until you have a formal diagnosis. So it's a bit tough when you want the help and you want to get it there, but you don't have access to it yet.
Yes. And that is a problem, in that I'm not one to really seek diagnostic labels, but we do work in systems that are funded for those diagnostic labels. So, university is one of those things. They can't do anything until there's a label.
Yeah.
What you can do, though, is a lot of self-guided research. And I would say that executive functioning, which is task-directed work, that if you research on executive functioning, you'll find a lot of strategies. In fact, there's almost too many hints and tips and things out there that you can do those. You don't work with a coach because you're generating those hints and those tips or those strategy ideas. You work with a coach because it's about making it stick.
Yeah.
It's about having a buddy on side to, with the small A, accountability. So Val, you can definitely try and have another brave conversation with uni about, I'm in the process of getting a diagnosis. These are the things I find difficult. And just framing it like this, these are the things I'm aware of is difficult. And then also for yourself, you can perhaps go off and research certain areas that you find difficult to find strategies. And, it can be a coach, it can be a therapist, it can be a family member to help you break down the task into easily achievable chunks.
Yeah.
and work with other people.
Seems to work for me.
Sorry, you're just both looking at each other now.
No, like what seems to work for me very well is having a body double.
Yes.
In the room.
Yes.
It keeps me accountable.
Yeah.
So it's just having someone else there, and it's, you'll be working and you have someone there that's just, they might be doing their own thing, but it works really well.
Yeah, I love body doubling. I think body doubling, it can be even going to a library, I think, is a version of body doubling. When you see people, you sit next to the most productive person, because that basically keeps you on pace. Yeah. You've also got apps such as FocusMate. I don't know if you've heard of FocusMate.
No.
So FocusMate, and I'm not getting any funding for this. FocusMate, and there's lots of other ones out there, I should say, but that's one I'm very aware of. You can sign up. They've got a free plan, and anywhere in the world you can be matched up with a partner for 25 minutes or 50-minute blocks. Okay. And you can just work alongside that person. You can have your mic on, mic off. That's really good. Also on YouTube, a lot of people, particularly during COVID, were recording themselves working, and so you're not actually working alongside them in real time, but when you look up and there's a YouTube of a video of someone working, you feel like you're body doubling. Just move to work with other people. Body doubling is really good. I mean, there's the classic that people talk about, timers. I basically have a mindset shift on timers. Pomodoro is where you work for 25 minutes because they consider that to be an optimum time for concentration, and then you have a 10-minute break and then another 25. I incentivize that by saying the timer is going to go off for a break. Rather than trying to think I've got to work hard for 25 minutes. Yeah. I just kind of go, right, I've got to try and do everything I possibly can so I can earn that break.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen, working in this industry, families with many people with different diagnoses within the family, where mum and 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, a combination of ASD and ADHD, where mum, it's ADHD, she is ADHD, and what would be some strategies? Because, dealing with adults, it's easy, I would say, than, you try to manage 3 kids at the same time, and all having ADHD makes it even harder, So I know one mum that has to manage appointments for 4 children, and her doesn't have time to manage her own appointments, and it's sort of like a very good example when the oxygen mask falls in the plane, where you put it to yourself first and then helps other. So what would be, recommendation, strategy, or that you can give a mum dealing with?
Okay, all right. So there's a couple of things that come to my mind. First of all, I guess, is collective action, so mobilizing the troops. So whiteboards for the family, family meetings where everyone takes a sense of responsibility and helps plan out the week. And I'm very aware that depends on how receptive the children are and how old they are, but with some of my mothers that's worked really well, that they've had a planning day. And they've gamified, so gamifying is making something fun, earning points. So I've worked with a mum where with her sons who are big gamers, we gamified tasks. So every Sunday they would be allocated different points for what they did, and they'd power up and level up. You can do that as a strategy, but it's also around self-care, because the mother is quite often, the parents are holding the family. Yeah. So there's a term in the neurodivergent community called glimmers, and glimmers are these very short period of time kind of mood lifters. So a glimmer for me is when you get the foil over a coffee jar and you pierce it and you get the smell of coffee and you get that I get this instant sense of joy. It's a little mood lifter. you use these glimmers because it's not always possible when you're time poor to go off and do a 30-minute meditation or walk through the woods, right? Yeah. But if you can understand those little moments where you feel kind of like lifted, and you can mindfully tune into what I call micro moments, these glimmers, you pepper those throughout your day. A mother can also look at when she has high energy and lower energy and work out where to put the task for that. And things like externalizing cognitive demands. So that's why those planners do work, because it takes it out of the brain space and puts it somewhere visible. So that chore list is an externalizing example strategy, but so is like use of a big old traditional calendar or a LinkedIn calendar for everyone where it flags up. Yeah. I think when I'm asked about individual strategies, this is where it's that one-on-one work.
No, I understand, and it's obviously that's the way it is. But sometimes in the general world, one thing works for most of the people, and
I will say on that, I've got a clock in my bathroom, and I don't think that's so common, but I know that I lose time having a shower. It's one of my favourite places.
I need one of those.
Yes, and I would say that you get a very noisy analog clock. Don't get a digital one. Get one where you can see the hand moving around. And so with children, what you can then do is you can colour in the sections of like, you've got 10 minutes from here. You've got, you can always do those strategies as well as a family.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because the sand clock didn't work.
But that's the other thing with when we rely too heavily on these strategies and we don't have that framework of support or accountability or working when we're struggling alone, it's making those strategies stick, because an ADHD brain likes novelty and it likes newness. We're motivated by some things that are interest and novel and urgent and have got a sort of sense of play and passion to them. So if we're doing the same thing over and over again, it might work, but you're not a failure if all of a sudden your brain rebels against it. In fact, that's what an ADHD brain will do 9 times out of 10. You can have a list of strategies, but expect to cycle through them when they get boring for your brain.
Yeah. So as an employer, what can we do to support people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, or you are under the impression as an employer, under the impression that someone's got ADHD, but haven't got the diagnosis, or if someone has a diagnosis, so how can we help to make it better at work?
The expert on it is really the employees, really the individual. So your job is just to create that safe place for those conversations to take place, So there's a number of schemes out there. There's like the Sunflower Scheme, the Hidden Disabilities Scheme, that will do on-site training around hidden disabilities. So your whole workplace can be upskilled into what that looks like and ways to support. Although I think, having an open door and making your employer feel valued, that, you recognise the quality and their value of work does lead you to be able to empower that individual so that they can come up to you with strategies. So creating that safety and that support for psychological safety. And in fact, it's in legislation now that we've got a responsibility as employers to create psychologically safe places. So those conversations being the employee knowing that they're going to have a warm reception without judgment, but using curiosity and asking what that person feels they need is the biggest thing. Second of all, I guess, or third of all, I would say look at workplace design. Open space offices are not always the most productive. There can be a lot of noise. There can be so look at the layout of your workplaces as well, and consult with your team on that. You know, what works for us here, what doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
And just keep asking questions.
Yeah, because you know, not everyone is ready to disclose.
No.
So
and there's a phrase that I've heard that I love, is that, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. So you're not doing it for one or two individuals when you do these workplace redesigns or having an open door policy. It benefits all of your employees. You're making it equitable for everyone.
Yeah.
So it only benefits everyone, and it's very simple things like giving very clear and precise instructions around what your expectations of an outcome are. You know, how will you know that a piece of work is finished? What is it that you as an employee expects? Is there a way that you can break those tasks down again into smaller components so that there's certain points where the employer is invited to discuss if they're having any issues? Because I find that the biggest thing that I have with adults is that when their manager asks them to do something and then leaves them, and they're struggling and not really clear about what the remit is, and they don't get to have that discussion until the very end. Or we get managers that go the other way, which is micromanaging, which adds to that shame that a neurodivergent person can have if they're struggling.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So you've got the dialectical balance of being there so that they can go to you without being over their shoulder all the time. So being present and giving space.
Yeah. And you mentioned that there's a few places where we as employers or, you know, employees can go and ask for help for their work space.
Yeah. So some bigger organisations will have HR, and HR is now being trained up into psychological safety, including neurodivergency. So bigger organisations should be having HR's teams that are becoming much more informed. Smaller businesses and individuals, the job access page, the government page, is getting a lot better on that, so you can definitely look at that. And I find that it's just using curiosity to do a Google search. You can find things, because again, as an employer, it's not up to you to provide the answer. It's up to the employee to find their solution.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's all combined. You know, someone has to start the conversation.
Yes.
Otherwise, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, and you can, if you don't have HR department, or you want everyone to be aware about, you know, how neurodiversity inclusion can be done, you know, not necessarily someone has to go knock on the door of the office and say, oh, I've got ADHD, what can we do?
Yeah. I did mention the Hidden Disabilities Organisation. That's a resource. What I guess I'm trying to get at is that people are much more likely to share their struggles if they feel that they can have these conversations and that they'll be well received. You as a manager, or any managers out there, or any colleagues of people, can just say, it can be a very simple collegial, hey, I noticed that you're running late on that deadline, or you've told me that you're running late on that deadline. Is there anything that we can do to help? Would you like to have a check-in before the deadline to see how you're going? Would you like to work alongside someone who's done this job before, so you can see what's involved? You know, and just put those, you know, I wonder if, or what if, or those kind of questions that, again, that are just very open to showing that you're highly adaptable.
Yeah.
The fact that you're asking this question means that I feel quite reassured that you're already quite open here. And you'll know what your team's strengths are as well. So please, any managers or any colleagues, if you're asking someone if they need support, please also balance that with, you've done great work on this. I can see that your strength here is that I'm a really good researcher but that can also be a double-edged sword,
Mm-hmm.
You might need to come to me, Sandra, and say, Emma, I can see that you get deeply passionate about the research, because I fall down rabbit holes. And just to reassure you, you've given us enough for this. Would you like to finish off this project and later on look at this other thing that you've just discovered?
Yeah.
So it's a gentle nudge sometimes.
Yeah. So you are going to be part of a summit this Friday. Do you want to talk about it or not?
Oh, I can. I can. So this Friday I am part of a panel presenting to the Diversity and Inclusion Summit that's going to be at the Engineers Institute. So that's a cross-industry summit that is actually run on 2 sites, Perth and Melbourne. So it's going to be quite a big summit, my understanding is. And it's from, like I said, cross-industry. So quite interestingly, they've reached out to me. The founder has reached out to me, recognising that I'm a therapist and seeing that can add a different aspect beyond what, HR, we've got lawyers, we've got industry leads, and actually looking at how therapeutically people can navigate the system as well. And my passion is self-care.
Yeah.
Really, and the emotional regulation that happens with neurodivergency, those challenges. Again, knowing that from the inside out. So we've got that. I'm also the founder of the MHPN ADHD WA network, which is the Mental Health Professionals Network, which is a government organised training network that's open for all health professionals, and we do that online. So we've looked at the clinical guidelines for ADHD, we've looked at neuroaffirming practice, and at some point very soon we might be doing CBT for ADHD, doing a very short kind of seminar on that.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's interesting, yeah. That's good. So,
and I should mention as well, we've also got the ADHD WA conference as well in November. So you'll see me popping up there as well. Like I said, very passionate.
Yeah, no, and it's when, as I said before, when you have that lived experience, it gives you, you get it. That's the difference, and I'm not. I want to recognize, all the therapists and people out there that work that, don't have that lived experience and do an amazing work.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just, but when it's related to what you've been through, then that's that extra.
Yeah, it does.
Lived experience.
It does. I mean, I'm very, 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 very lucky to be supervised by Michelle Toner, who works for ADHD WA and is actually, we call her the OG of ADHD coaching, because she was the first ADHD coach in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's been doing it for many, many years now. She doesn't directly identify with having ADHD herself, but she has got lived experience because it's within her family and within her community. So I guess that's the other thing, is that we can think expansively of lived experience as well.
Yeah.
It's not always necessarily that person has got direct lived experience. It might be that they are the mother or the sister or the aunt or the close neighbour to someone with ADHD. They might have it within their community.
Yeah.
And I think that's still incredibly valid. And we've also got some incredible clinicians that have just got natural abundance of empathy and can just get it anyway.
Yeah.
Just understand.
That's for sure.
So you're also a mental health
occupational therapist. Yeah.
How does the comorbidity of like depression and anxiety go with ADHD?
Yeah. Oh, you've got killer questions, Val.
Because I know, like, I'm studying psychology.
Yes.
So I know that they're two of the most common comorbidities of ADHD and ASD. Yes. They happen because you don't feel like you fit in a place.
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with that, or how do you treat it in a way? Because you've got ADHD coaching as well as mental health.
Yes, yeah. So at the beginning I said that ADHD coaching is not the place if you've got distress, like mental health distress. So if there is that higher level of mental health, if there's been any risk of harm or anything, then I will say that that's therapy, not coaching. I'll only work with people with coaching if they're somewhat stabilised. Yep. How it works is it's very hard to put a figure on it, but they reckon around 80% of ADHDers have meet that affective disorder of anxiety or depression, that they've got the co-occurrence of that. It's very, very high. I also think that we've got somewhat mixed diagnostic pictures, in that I think you're much more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety as a woman with ADHD, because again, you'll be saying to your doctor, I've got all these racing thoughts, and they'll think that that's rumination and worry. Because we never used to recognise ADHD with adult women. Yeah. Because you didn't used to have it. They used to think that ADHD is something you grew out of. Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely there. And I would appeal to anyone that if you've got ADHD and anxiety and depression, you get treatment for both. Because what can happen with the ADHD medication can somewhat slow down and clarify your thoughts, which if you're very depressed, for example, and you've got any drive or towards, say, suicidality, that can be a dangerous thing, because all of a sudden you've got that ability to be much more clear in your planning and your intention. And actually the ADHD medication can then work to kind of consolidate some of that rumination and that worry or that depressive thinking. So it's very, very important that you get treatment for both. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I haven't thought it like that, but yes, it's...
Yeah, because if you get treated for one, it only helps the other one be sort of worse.
Yes.
In a way, yeah.
Absolutely. My service level agreement, for example, when I do work with people with ADHD, and don't forget I am also a therapist, but when I do, my service level agreement for ADHD coaching says that if I notice any distress, or if they're aware of any mental health distress, they will seek appropriate help, and or we will review for mental health support. Because the last thing you want is that someone is in that kind of survival mode of anxiety and depression, and is fighting with those thoughts towards like injury or self-harm, injury or suicide. And we're working on these goals that actually pile on the pressure and self-expectation. You do need quite often a team, a very good GP that's informed, psychologist, a coach, OT. They're all really good people to have on your team.
And in the community, is there any major groups where people can seek peers that understand? The peer support is really, really important. And as we were talking before, if someone has the same or has gone through the same as me, understand. So we tend to the sparky brains come together.
In our state, WA, I think one of the most established agencies for that is ADHD WA, and you become a member for them, and then you Michelle Toner runs the support groups, walks around Lake Munga. There's lots of free training that you can go to, lots of information sessions with they get psychiatrists in to talk to the support group, and they get lots of other people. But more importantly, again, you're not alone. You've got that peer support. So you can definitely do that. And then there's lots of there's ADHD Australia. So across, there's lots. Facebook has given us lots of community groups. So they're there, but you won't seek that support until you get that sense of self-acceptance of what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, or what it could be.
Yeah, that's why we need to start talking about it, because the more you talk, you know, the more you can relate. You know, it has happened with people that we've helped here or support that are seeking a diagnosis for their children, but they see themselves, you know, it's like, I understand now.
Yes, absolutely. I've actually even said in one session, I'm sorry, are we actually talking about your children, or are we talking about you? And I've meant that with the greatest of warm regard and, you know, positive intention, because I think sometimes until you've got that self-acceptance, you're seeking all of this information, because again, that imposter syndrome of could it be? So you start to gather all this information up first of all, but eventually you just have to go, okay, if I have got this neurodivergency, okay, great. How can this work for me?
Yeah. So, and have you seen with the people that you work in and help a change? I mean, I would have been worried if it hasn't happened, but when I was a kid, you know, now I know that if someone had ADHD, you know, the hyperactivity part was like, this kid is not naughty and needs medication, and usually was Ritalin, and they expected the kid to be sitting there and listening to everyone. Now we have more information, more knowledge, and it's more open.
Yes.
So, did you see that difference?
I definitely do. I mean, again, Val's question about COVID, I think, has been a great enabler to change this mindset, for adults to reflect, okay, maybe we're neurodivergent, and what does that mean? What would that have changed if I'd known about this earlier? And if I'm a parent, what do I want the world to look like for my children? So I think there has been a really big attitudinal change towards acceptance because of COVID and because of social media. And I see people walking along a journey, both in therapy and in coaching, where there's always a lot of questions. There's usually a what if. I recognise in my client's journey and in my own, there's this moment where you have grief of what could have been, perhaps, or all the things that you realise you told yourself and all those labels and everything you allowed. But then you get to this place where it starts to integrate and it all starts to make sense, and you go, okay, now moving forward, this is how it's going to be different. And that's a really nice moment when you own it and you go, this is what I know about myself now, so moving forward, these are the choices I can make.
Yeah. Is it still much difference between adults male and adults female seeking a diagnosis? Or
well, I don't provide a diagnosis, but
no.
Sometimes people come to me, particularly more for the ADHD coaching, because there's no mental health diagnosis, with a lot of questions, because they're in that information gathering. They're seeking all of that. I do sometimes see that women, my own observation is that women sometimes are a bit more compelled, because they do feel much more responsible for making sure that their daughter in particular, or their son, do not have the same experience. I think with men, it's when we've got problematic behaviours, so when it has turned to those dopamine maladaptive strategies such as alcohol use or substance use or gambling, or it's started to break down a relationship, that's when I see maybe men will come to services to seek a diagnosis when it's become outside of what's socially quote unquote acceptable.
Yeah. I'm only asking because when you have children, you know, dad, it's more likely to be in that non-accepting stage, or you know, like it's harder for them to recognize that there is something that needs to be addressed with the children than the mum, you know. So I'm guessing taking that to the next level, you know, it's harder for men to accept and say, okay, maybe I should see something.
Yeah. If you think of some of those externalizing symptoms of ADHD, the hyperactivity and impulsiveness, it can look like someone that doesn't want to sit down, someone that's got a lot of energy, someone that is quite loud speaking and interrupts. And if we look at it through maybe an archaic gender lens, traditionally men have been seen to be quite powerful if they're outspoken, got lots of energy, lots of drive, loud. So, you know, traditionally we were okay with boys being like that. It's perhaps not always been so acceptable for girls, for women, which is why it's been more internalizing. But I think that what that also means is that the male parent quite often has got this broader tolerance for those externalizing symptoms of they've just got lots of energy, they've got lots of get up and go, they stand up for themselves, good on them. And even if we try to, you know, just pass that and get past that and teach our boys, you know, same way that, you know, girls, the same rights, the same things, the same, you know, it's sometimes still these are behaviors that are acceptable for boys but not for girls, and you know, it's part of another conversation. I think so.
Yeah, but I think, like, as well as what Sandra's saying is as young, like what you said before, the females don't go around running, screaming, you know, with their ADHD, but boys do. And then you see them doing it more and you're like, oh, he might have ADHD. But for girls, it's different.
Yes.
So,
which is why if you look at the prevalence of diagnosis, it's always been higher with boys because they externalize and they can be seen as more problematic or disruptive. Yeah. Whereas, like I said, and like you've picked up, you know, I was probably the most helpful girl in the classroom. But when it came to old style schooling of being dictated timetables in primary school was one where it really showed up. I always knew that I was never going to get a break on a Friday at primary school because I was always going to get detention for not being able to listen. You know, and actually it's so, you know, I've done some assessments. It so turns out that I've got a bit of auditory processing. So the classroom was at the front of the school near a main road. There was a hospital nearby, ambulances would go past, There was always distractions. My hearing was slightly distorted in noisy environments. So I wasn't always picking up the dictated like 9's times table or whatever, you know. But the difference is that I had been taught that I don't act out. So I was never a conduct issue in the classroom. So I never really got reported. I just quietly accepted my detention. And because of that, the teacher never really complained too much to my parents. Except she chats too much and she doesn't pay attention.
Is that describing yourself or me?
Maybe all of us. But it would have been different. I would have been picked up so much more if my impulsivity had led me to throw something across the classroom or act in a boisterous way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I know, before my other question, how many ADHD coaches do you know here in Western Australia?
Ooh.
Is it many?
It is.
We can Google it. So
don't
worry.
Growing. The web page to see the ADHD coaches that or ICF endorsed is the AustrAsianADHDcoach.com.
Okay.
So that website will list all of them, but we're getting quite a growing number actually.
We'll put that out there so everyone can have a look at their website and start, searching for coaches.
Yeah, can I give a bit of a disclaimer in that ADHD coaching isn't regulated. ADHD coaching isn't regulated. When you've got people that are going through these membership bodies such as ICF, they're actually choosing to uphold some standards of conduct, professional conduct, and you have to do certain continuous professional development hours and meet certain remits. So that's a really good question for anyone who's looking for an ADHD coach, is how long have you been doing this? What training have you done? And are you affiliated to any professional body? Have you voluntarily signed yourself up with any regulatory body? That's
important. So I know you're quite busy with work, so not taking referral at the moment.
No, I'm just one of my things, I've been running my business for 5 years. I actually started off as a mental health first aid instructor, because what I recognise is that getting the information out into communities is the biggest thing that we can do as providers to support our clients.
I think so.
I'm not taking referrals, but you might see me popping up here and there because I'm still really passionate about keeping communities cohesive and understanding.
Yeah, that's good, because this is the I've said it before, but this is the purpose of this podcast. Information, any information is valuable, because there's always going to be a group of people, it doesn't matter if it's small or large, that is going to use that information, and if not, they're going to share it with someone that needs it. So I don't know if you have any other questions.
No, not for me.
No.
You, Val, because you ask difficult questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what she's sitting here. So, anything else that you want to share with us before we wrapped up?
No, just a thank you. It's been a pleasure to do this podcast today. It's been lovely to meet you and see your offices.
Thank you.
For all the work you do for community.
Yes, so it's, as I said, we're very passionate about helping the community and, bringing people together and giving power through information.
Yeah.
So if you see that you are in a certain situation, you go to the right people asking for help.
Yeah.
And then start your journey, because every person and journey is unique. So thank you so much for all the information that you shared with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Taking insight. So I'm going to listen to this podcast a few times. So.
You might need to. I might need to.
But, to everyone that has a diagnosis or is thinking about it, or any information, there's lots of information out there. YouTube, Google, the associations and all bodies. So we're going to somehow put all the information,
sounds good,
or the website, where people can go and find information and start reading and start, that's how you start taking the first step.
And I'm not accepting referrals, but if anyone's got any burning questions, they can also email me at enrichedbyexperience@gmail.com. And my website is up there, enrichedbyexperience.com. It's not been the highest priority for me to keep it updated. I'm not someone that posts a lot on social media. I'm much more kind of out and doing the stuff. And also seem to be time poor all the time. But, if you've got any questions, or I'm more than happy to signpost people towards different agencies as well, if I don't have capacity.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And remembering that getting diagnosed is not a shameful thing, like a stigmatized thing. It's something, if it helps you, it helps you. And that's it. You can get the help you need.
Yeah, that's a nice point. And just to add to that, I guess, It's, like I said, mine was a 4-year journey, really, 2 years to get that diagnosis, partly because access to services, wait lists, but also no one can be forced to seek a diagnosis. It's got to be when that person is ready and open to it, because it's a real journey. It's a real mixed bag experience of relief, validation, sort of a strange joy, and a kind of a grief and a reflection. Yeah.
But you use it when you need it.
Absolutely.
You know, you don't have to, you're not forced to disclose anything. So, and that's the beauty of it.
Yes.
You make it work for you.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Thank you everyone for listening. And I know this is going to be very intense to listen. So if you have any questions, send it to us beyond@bloomingSupports.com.au. We're going to put the information of Emma's website and email as well there. So feel free to reach out. And there's always someone willing to listen and answer questions. So, Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.